Okay, so for 3 and 4, I have combined the two together because 3 is talking about the cell membrane and 4 is talking about uh, diffusion and how things get in and out of the cell membrane. So the cell membranes, they're composed of two phospholipid layers. So the cell membrane is going to have two major functions. It is going to form a boundary between the inside and outside of the cell, and it's going to control passage of materials in and out of the cell. So when we look at this picture here, you've got, again, the two layers. Here's one layer, so there's layer 1, and here's layer 2. Okay, so those two layers, you've got um, that right there is the head. And again, there's another head right there. And then in between are going to be the tails. So the heads are attracted to the water. The tails are afraid of the water. Uh, and we'll do an activity for you to be able to understand in class why it makes the two layers instead of just being one layer. So the cell membrane is made up of a phospholipid bilayer. The There are other molecules embedded in the membrane. Some of them are going to be there to help things be able to move in and out that normally wouldn't be able to. Other things are going to be in the surface to help signal things. So it has lots of different things within it. It is described as a fluid mosaic model because those things can move around within the cell membrane. So it's sort of like a liquid, and they can be flowing and moving around over the surface of that cell. So the cell membrane is what's known as selectively permeable. So it's going to allow some things in and keep other things out. You can sort of think of it, the cell membrane as being sort of like the bouncer of the cell. It's only going to allow in the things that it wants to allow in. And then if something else is having to get in, it's going to need to find some other way to get in there. And it's probably going to be a little tricky to get that thing in that doesn't normally want to go through that cell membrane. So a lot of times you're going to end up having receptors on the cell membrane, and those receptors are going to bind with ligands and change shape. And there are two types of receptors. You have intracellular receptors and you have membrane receptors. So again, these are just going to be ways for things to be able to get in and out of the cell that normally couldn't go through that cell membrane. So, like I was saying before, the water is going to be uh, water is a not something that normally is able to easily go through a cell membrane because, like I said, the head is attracted to the water, the tail is afraid of the water. So the best way for a cell membrane to form is it's going to need to have the heads located on the outside and the tails safely tucked away on the inside. So the heads can be in contact with water that's outside the cell and inside the cell, and then the tails are safely tucked away in the middle. When we are looking at water moving through a cell membrane, that process is going to be dealing with diffusion and osmosis. And as we talk about that, there's going to be special channels called aquaporins that are in the cell membrane. There are protein channels that are going to allow water to be able to move in and out of the cell. So when we talk about passive transport does not require energy input from the cell. It's going to happen. The cell doesn't have to put forth any energy for it to occur. So molecules can move across the cell membrane through passive transport. When we talk about passive transport, it's always going to go areas of high concentration to low concentration. So if you think about that high to low, so we've got, again, high, and then we've got low, that's going to be downhill. That was a beautiful arrow. So that is how this ends up working, is passive transport goes high to low. So it's not going to take any energy to be able to fall down. So there are two types of passive transport. You have diffusion, and there's osmosis, which is going to sort of fall into that category. Another name for the osmosis would be facilitated diffusion. So that's going to be where it has a little bit of help through like a protein channel or something like that. So diffusion and osmosis are types of passive transport. So molecules diffuse down a concentration gradient. That's what I just drew on the last page, where it goes high concentration to low concentration. Osmosis is the diffusion of water across a semi-permeable membrane. I already said that water is not going to easily be able to go through because those hydrophobic tails of our cell membranes don't want to be in contact with water. So we need a channel that's going to form, and that's what's known as the aquapurine. So there are three types of solutions when we're talking about diffusion and osmosis. The water molecules always want to be balanced. So there are different types of solutions out there. You have isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic. Isotonic is going to be equal. There's going to be equal amount of water on both sides. Hypertonic, if you put a cell in a hypertonic solution, the way that I think of it is if someone's hyper and they're running around all the time, what's going to happen is that person's going to be really skinny. And so they're going to be a hypertonic solution is going to cause the cell to lose water, and it's going to become shriveled. Hypotonic, if you think hypo, so hypotonic, you're going to end up with the water going into the cell, making it large. So a hypotonic solution is going to be one where the cell increases in size. So that's what it's showing down here. Again, so isotonic, when it's an isotonic solution, notice that the water is moving both in and out down there. Hypotonic, inside the cell. Hypertonic, outside. The water is going to be moving out to make it equal. And then hypotonic on the outside, it's going to be going into the cell to make it so it is once again in equilibrium or balanced. So some molecules can only diffuse through transport proteins. So some molecules can easily diffuse across the cell membrane without any help, but others need to do what's known as facilitated diffusion, like I mentioned earlier, and that is what happens with water and through osmosis. So facilitated diffusion is the process of diffusion using transport proteins. And in this case right here, this would be, if we're talking about those being water molecules, that would be what's known as an aquapurine. And that's going to be how the water is going to be able to go through that cell membrane. Okay, that is the end of the notes for section 3 and 4.